Hello, my name is Andy Siegel. I'm the senior trial lawyer at Siegel Coonerty. We're a medical malpractice and personal injury firm here in New York City. Today's video tip, traumatic brain injury. In order to discuss this, I'd like you to meet my little friend, Timmy. He's been an exhibit in many of my cases involving traumatic brain injuries. First thing we should do, real briefly, is go over the anatomy of the brain. The brain obviously is a soft tissue structure and it floats inside a hard exterior, the shell, the human skull. And it's no coincidence that the brain is housed in a hard structure. It's for protection. But what may protect people in one circumstance, meaning walking around every day, can also be a foe in other circumstances. And what I mean is when there's trauma to the head and to the brain. Trauma can come generally in two forces. One would be a force upon the head, or what's known as an acceleration injury, where something comes into a head that is not in motion and then puts the head in motion, where the skull is protecting the brain on the outside. On the inside of the skull, mostly in the frontal area, are bony protuberances, little spikes in the skull that can impact the frontal lobes and cause injury as a result of the accelerating force, because the force hits the head shifts, the brain stays where it is, and there's motion abutting the inside of the skull. That's known as an acceleration injury. There are also traumatic brain injuries that are known as deceleration injuries. What's that? A deceleration injury is where the head is in motion, such as in a car, and then the motion abruptly stops and the head moves forward and then makes contact with a fixed object. The same principles apply. The brain inside the bony protective housing is moved and there's injury to the soft tissue structure. Now, brain injuries come in many different varieties. There can be injury to the brain matter itself. That's known as an intracerebral or intrahemispheric brain injury. Very devastating. There can also be injuries to the structures within the brain. These typical injuries are known as a diffuse axonal injury. Again, without getting too deep into the medical aspects of it, the white matter and gray matter of the brain, they're of different weight. When the brain, there is a force upon the brain and the brain is moved, because the white matter and gray matter are of different densities, they slow down at different rates, and the axons, which are long, stringy anatomy that are attached to the neurons that are between the white and gray matter, they shear because the brain stops at different rates of speed. These shearing injuries are known as diffuse axonal injuries. There are also injuries to the structures that can affect the brain, such as the lining of the brain. There can be injuries to the dura, which is one of the meninges of the brain. There can be injury to the arachnoid, which is another lining of the brain. And most of you have heard the term subdural hemorrhage or subarachnoid hemorrhage. These are terms that are defined as injuries to these linings that can affect the brain. In the case over here, we had a construction worker who was underneath some pipes. They weren't secured properly and the pipes came down onto the back of his head and he sustained a bleed. You can see here circled in the red. This was a subdural bleed, and although it didn't injure his brain directly, meaning it was outside of his brain, the collection of fluid created a force upon the brain. The brain shifted towards the right, and this is known as a midline shift. Another very serious injury that requires an operative removal of the offending blood substance causing pressure on the brain. Again, this is not an extensive dissertation on brain injuries, but these are the types of brain injuries that can occur. If you have questions, if you or someone you know has sustained a traumatic brain injury, call Siegel and Coonerty, 212-532-0532. Ask for Andrew Siegel. I'll answer your questions. Have a good day.